The Scent of Crimson Part 2. Chapter 15, The Scent of Fire. She woke to smoke, not sirens. Not the thick, choking kind that fills the lungs, but the early kind. Clean, dry, almost sweet. Like burned cedar bark and old dust. It wasn't the city burning. It was her. Cassandra Vale rose without panic. No gasp. No scramble. Just movement. Trained. Quiet. Immediate. She followed the scent. Down the stairs. Past the locked study. To the far end of the hall. Where the door to her scent room stood open. The air behind it shimmered with heat. She stepped through the threshold. And saw everything gone. The shelves had collapsed inward. The glass vials exploded from within, shards glittering on the floor like broken stars. Her notes. Ash. Her blotters. Curled and blackened like the wings of insects. Even the mirrored wall, cracked in 6 places. Every object in the room was ruined. But nothing else in the house had burned. The flames hadn't spread. They had targeted. Contained. Curated. Like a funeral pyre for memory. And at the center of the floor, in a small circle of untouched stone, sat one item. A vial. Melted around the edges. Label half-curled. But still legible. Us. Cassandra knelt beside it, inhaling the smoke that still curled faintly from the blackened floor. The scent was unique. It wasn't hers. And it wasn't entirely his. It was a blend of their first meeting. White musk. Powdered vanilla. The cedar from her childhood home. And the bitter bite of cold metal, gun oil, sharpened memory, and bloodied restraint. He hadn't just burned her sanctuary. He had distilled it. Reeve arrived minutes later, breathless, eyes wide as he stepped into the hallway. Jesus Christ, Cassandra, are you hurt? She shook her head once. No fire damage anywhere else, he said, looking around in disbelief. No signs of forced entry. It's like the fire knew exactly where to go. It did, she murmured. He stepped into the doorway and stopped, seeing the devastation. Your notes. Your samples. Everything I was before this case, she said, standing slowly, has been reformatted. Reeve scanned the room again. So this wasn't a warning? No, Cassandra said, staring at the broken mirror. It was a gesture. She picked up the melted vial, still warm to the touch. A blend called us. Not a plea. Not a claim. An identity. Shared. Imagined. Built. She didn't cry. But something inside her shifted. A kind of loss not easily catalogued. Because this room was more than memory. It was the one place she could hear herself think. And now it was a grave. She turned to Reeve. Tell them I need access to the archives. Every closed case from the last 20 years that went cold with a missing scent sample. Why? Because this isn't about me anymore. It's about us. And I need to remember who else I've forgotten. She walked past him without another word, the smoke still clinging to her coat. Outside, the early morning sky was colorless. But in the air, a new note lingered. Sweet. Metallic. Waiting. Chapter 16, A Signature Hidden in Dust. The Metropolitan Police Evidence Archive wasn't built for reverence. It was cold. Steel. Dust and fluorescent lights. Cassandra Vale preferred it that way. Truth, when unvarnished, had a texture. It clung to you. It scratched when you moved too quickly. She moved slowly. One hand gloved, the other bare, fingertips grazing faded labels, numbers, misfiled fragments of the city's unsolved violence. She wasn't looking for a name. She was looking for a breach. A single box caught her eye. Slightly out of line. Older than the rest. Labeled. Case 709B, violent death, no scent sample logged, closed. She froze. Because she remembered this case. 10 years ago. A pianist named Julian Roth. Found in his Chelsea flat, wrists bound in red ribbon. Eyes open. Window cracked. No scent sample had ever been recovered. She'd written that herself. Scent contaminated by ventilation. Evidence unusable. Only now, inside the box, she saw something she'd never logged. A sealed vial. Full. Capped. Tagged with her initials. But she hadn't placed it there. She pulled it gently from the evidence pouch. Held it to the light. Inside, a pale gray powder. Barely visible. Lighter than ash. "That's not fragrance oil," she murmured. She took out her portable UV penlight. Swept it across the vial. The powder glowed. Faintly. Purple. Like trace pollen mixed with crushed stone. What the hell? She opened her field kit. Swabbed the glass carefully. Dabbed a trace on a strip of clean blotter. Then smelled it. And immediately sat down. Hard. The scent was hers. But reversed. Not in chemistry. In emotion. It was a scent she had never worn. But one she had felt. Submission. The kind she catalogued in victims before their death. The moment they let go. Her hand shook. Just slightly. Because this wasn't a memory being replayed. This was a message sent 10 years early. Planted where only she could one day find it. And the dust? Not from the case scene. From her townhouse. She recognized the cedar blend from the molding. "You've been in this longer than I have," she whispered. "You built this before I noticed." She reached into the bottom of the box. Found a second tag. Unattached. Unofficial. Typed. Just one line. "Do you remember why you left the window open?" The Roth case. She had forgotten that detail. But now, she could see it. Standing in the flat. Spring wind brushing against her face. Scent missing. And that moment, when she had chosen not to question it. Because deep down, even then, something felt familiar. She opened her scent journal. Wrote. Case 709B, precursor. Vial planted. Scent inversion, victim state rendered as echo. Emotional fingerprint, mine. Then paused. Wrote beneath it. Timeline breach confirmed. I did not meet him recently. I just finally caught up. She resealed the vial and pressed the box gently back into place. She would not sign it out. She would not log this find. Not yet. Because someone else already had. As she turned to leave, she brushed against the shelf beside her. And her hand came away dusted in violet. Not from the vial. From the shelf. Etched faintly into the metal, barely visible. Was a single fingerprint. Pressed in perfume powder. Hers. But 10 years too early. Chapter 17, Echoes on Trial. The file came from a quiet corner of the forensic archive. Marked, temporarily withheld, by request. No department seal. No case number. No digital duplicate. Just a reel of old magnetic tape. A label scrawled in fading ink. State vs. Calix Marin, 2013, full audio, final day. Cassandra Vale had never heard that name. And yet, she knew it. Not from memory. From rhythm. From how it moved through her mouth when she whispered it aloud. Calix Marin, she said softly. Like a name meant to be forgotten. She signed nothing. Took the reel home in silence. Brought it to her old analog player in the study. Wiped the dust off the needle. Set it spinning. Pressed play. Recording begins, static, then clarity. Your Honor, the defense would like to recall Miss Cassandra Vale. Her hand stopped midair. Her voice came next. Measured. Calm. But unmistakably hers. I reaffirm my previous statement regarding the scent analysis performed at the scene. The sample was unadulterated, and the ratio confirms the blend was intentional. 5-part base, no volatile oils. Meant to last. A silence. Then. And you're certain the accused had access to this blend? He didn't just have access. He built it for her. Cassandra's chest tightened. She didn't remember saying this. Didn't remember this trial. Didn't remember this man. Another voice. Smooth. Deep. The defendant. Calix. You misunderstand, Miss Vale. I didn't build it for her. I built it from her. Gasps. Movement. A gavel strikes. Then the voice again, steady, unafraid. What's the difference between creation and memory, Cassandra? One is done with hands, her recorded voice answered coldly. The other with grief. Then the courtroom fell still. And the judge's voice, muffled, distant, spoke. This court finds the defendant. Tape crackle. Dropout. Silence. Cassandra stopped the reel. The edges of her breath caught fire. That never happened. She would have remembered. She remembered every trial. Every profile. Every sentence she helped write. But this? Did not exist. She ran a forensic search through sealed legal records. Nothing. No Calix Marin. No trial by that name. No court schedule matching the date on the tape. Erased. Or, never filed. She turned back to the tape. Rewound. Played it again. This time, she didn't listen for words. She listened for the room. And she heard it. The reverberation. The echo. This wasn't a courtroom. It was a stage. Or a mock court. The kind artists rent. For performances. For rehearsals. He had built it. Not just the tape. The trial. The prosecution. The defense. Her. Scripted. Staged. Constructed from how she sounded when she was sure. And the most terrifying part. She believed herself in the tape. Because it sounded right. Like the version of her she had once been. She opened her scent journal. Wrote. Echo trial, fabricated performance. Voice mimicry successful. Emotional memory planted. Marin equals alias. Origin point. Then, in the bottom corner of the page. He didn't build it to trap me. He built it so I would ask. What else did I forget? Outside, the wind had changed. And from beneath her window, the faintest scent of mock orange and ash drifted upward. She rose. Stepped to the sill. Looked down. Nothing there. But taped to the glass, on the outside. A photograph. A still image from the trial. She sat at the witness stand. Staring into the distance. But on the back of the photo, one line was scrawled. You were always convincing, Cassandra. Even to yourself. Chapter 18, The Sentence Structure. The language laboratory of Ravenscroft University hadn't been used in over a decade. Once a cutting-edge facility for phonetic mapping and semantic dissection, it had gone quiet after a funding scandal and a professor's mysterious disappearance. No one fought to preserve it. No one filed to demolish it. It simply sat. Forgotten. Much like Cassandra's unpublished thesis, last seen here, and left unfinished by her own request. When she stepped inside, dust greeted her like a pet left too long alone. The scent of old paper, oxidized wiring, dry plaster, and decayed leather binding hung in the air. But beneath it, one new note. Faint. Bitter. Slightly metallic. Ink. Fresh ink. She moved forward without a word, her boots echoing across the linoleum floor. Each desk was as she remembered. Each seat abandoned in the precise shape of its last occupant. Except one. The desk she used when she was 23. Back row. Left corner. Closest to the fire exit. She never trusted long hallways. And sitting atop it. A manila folder. Labeled. Vale, C. Sent Semantics Draft /2007. But she had never printed it. Not even for backup. Her copy had lived on a secured drive, locked in an encrypted format. Yet this was her formatting. Her structure. She opened the folder. Inside, 82 pages of her original draft. But not untouched. Edited. By hand. Red ink. Clean script. Unmistakably male. She flipped through the pages slowly. It wasn't correction. It was revision. Every time she described a scent as an emotional anchor, he'd added marginalia. Not anchor. Tether. Emotion is not framed by scent, it's recalled as command. You do not observe through fragrance. You are programmed by it. It wasn't critique. It was dialogue. By page 53, she stopped breathing. There, outlined with a single red circle, was a paragraph she never published. It read: To construct grief as a composition, one must understand that memory is not passive. It rewrites through scent. We do not smell to remember. We remember because we smell. And beneath it, he had written. I took this literally. And I used you as the control variable. Her hand shook, not with fear, but something worse. Recognition. This wasn't mockery. This was completion. He hadn't just read her thesis. He had built a life around it. She reached the final page. It was blank. Except for a single punctuation mark, drawn dead center. A full stop. Beneath it, sealed beneath tape. A drop of fragrance oil. Just one. She pressed her gloved finger to it. Lifted. Inhaled. Rain on stone. Green moss. The scent of endings. The scent she had once called closure. She had never bottled it. Never shared it. Only described it, in that thesis. He had found it. Recreated it. And placed it here. As if to say. This paper is now finished. And so are you. Cassandra sat at her old desk. Opened her scent journal. The corner of the paper curled under her trembling grip. She wrote. Sentence, rewritten thesis equals rewritten memory. Emotional authority compromised. Language structure now mimics emotional decay. Then paused. And beneath that. He didn't plagiarize me. He rewrote me. And now I'm reading myself from his point of view. Asterisk. She stood. The air shifted. Behind her, something creaked. She turned, swift, cold, ready. Nothing. Just the sound of a draft through the fire door. But along its surface, a symbol had been etched in black ash. A period. With a fingerprint below it. And the faintest scent. Lilac and carbon. The scent of a book burning shut. Chapter 19, The Violet Room Burns. The Hotel Pavon was known for silence. It catered to visiting academics, reclusive artists, and the kind of guests who preferred velvet over convenience. The staff wore gloves, and no room had televisions. So when smoke alarms sounded just after 3 a.m., they expected a candle mishap. A shorted lamp. Instead, they found room 413 burning like a funeral pyre. And only room 413. By the time Cassandra arrived, the fire had long been extinguished. The hallway outside the room was untouched. Carpet clean. Air still. Lights dimmed. And yet, the scent was unmistakable. Charred velvet. Burnt violet petals. Powdered amber reduced to ash. He finally destroyed something with elegance, she whispered. Detective Reeve met her outside the door. His face was paler than usual. Tense. No body, he said. But the firefighters found this. He handed her a photo. A shot from inside the room, taken moments after the flames died down. At the center. A chaise lounge, blackened, scorched. A shape, the negative space of a woman's form, still visible where the flames had refused to burn. As if the fire had honored her absence. Inside, the violet room lived up to its name. Or had. Now it was black and gray, edged in lavender dust and melted glass. And there, placed at the exact center of the scorched outline. A glass bottle. Still intact. Its stopper fused to the neck from heat. Cassandra knelt beside it. She didn't touch. She only leaned in. And inhaled. Iris. Damask rose. Crushed charcoal. And something faint, metallic, almost acidic. Her own scent. But layered with something violently synthetic. A mimicry of her most vulnerable blend. Oblivion. She had never sold it. She had worn it once. On the night she had considered disappearing. Not dying. Vanishing. Reeve cleared his throat. Fire inspectors say this blaze doesn't make sense. It consumed everything inside, furniture, fabric, personal effects, but left the walls, ceiling, and floor untouched. Intentional burn, she murmured. Designed to look like devastation, but without structural loss. This wasn't a fire. It was a framing device. She finally reached for the bottle. Gloved hands. Careful pressure. She cracked the stopper open with a soft pop. The scent escaped in a single, delicate spiral. And in that spiral, a memory coiled around her throat. A different hotel. A different room. She stood by the window in a black slip. Rain tapping the pane. A note in her hand. Her resignation letter. She had planned to vanish that night. No body. No story. Just air and silence. But she had stayed. Because a letter had arrived. No name. No scent. Just 3 words. You remain unfinished. She never told anyone. Not even Reeve. The same words were now etched into the glass base of the bottle in room 413. You remain unfinished. Cassandra stood. Her breath controlled, but her pulse. Not. She looked down at the chaise. The outline of the woman. The deliberate placement. This wasn't for me to solve, she said. Then for who? Reeve asked. For the version of me that disappeared that night. He's not threatening to kill me. He's trying to show me what it looked like. When I almost let myself go. She opened her scent journal. Wrote. Violet room, visual metaphor for emotional death. Staged void. Bottle equals anchor. Scent equals personal threshold. Then, in small, hard letters. I didn't vanish. But he wants me to see the silhouette of the woman who almost did. Reeves stepped into the frame of the doorway. He's escalating. You see that, right? No, she replied. He's completing. Outside, the morning air was sharp with rain. But beneath the petrichor and damp stone, she smelled paint. Wet canvas. A new composition was being prepared. And she already knew the title. Cassandra. Chapter 20, her final profile. The greenhouse stood at the edge of her late aunt's estate, just outside Windmere. Forgotten by the family. Swallowed by bramble. Glass panes spider-cracked and coated in ivy. Cassandra Vale hadn't returned here in years. Not since she was 19. Not since the night she wrote her first personal profile, by hand, under flickering lantern light, describing a young man who disappeared from campus and left behind nothing but a scent. Cherry smoke and mint. An echo. A riddle. It had never been solved. And she had never again profiled anyone without a body. Until now. She pushed open the greenhouse door. The creak was musical, familiar in its neglect. The air was damp, green, layered with age. Moss. Soil. Burnt citrus. A faint trail of lavender and something acidic. But most of all. Memory. She stepped over broken tile, past collapsed potting benches, to the far corner where a battered wrought iron table waited like an altar. There was already a chair pulled out. Waiting. And on the table. A blank case profile sheet. Stamped with her own watermark. Typed across the top. Subject, Vale, Cassandra. Forensic profile, to be completed. She didn't hesitate. She sat. Removed her gloves. Took the pen laid out before her. Not her own, but one she recognized. Black ink. Heavy barrel. Custom nib. She once gifted it to a man she couldn't prove existed. She wrote. Not in her hand. But in the voice he had used when mimicking hers. Name, Cassandra Vale. Age, suspended in recollection. Scent, cedar. Violet. Ash. Grief, tightly bottled. Primary trait, control through observation. Secondary trait, intuition repressed by structure. Tertiary trait, elegance forged from trauma. She paused. The pen hovered. Then kept going. Method of coping, cataloging memory to prevent decay. Method of denial, belief in objectivity. Achilles' heel, scent tied to formative loss. Greatest fear, becoming the memory someone else built of her. She stopped. Closed her eyes. And whispered. You wrote this. And now I'm finishing it. She reached for her scent journal, opened to a fresh page. And, for the first time, titled the entry with her own name. Vale, C. Subjective trace composition. She wrote. Primary note, steel restraint, forged in fire, polished in silence. Secondary note, violet leaf, never bloomed, symbolic yearning for permission to feel. Base, ash, scorched cedar, cold iris, the memory of something unchosen. Then, in red ink beneath. Used without consent. Remembered incorrectly. Rewritten by another. She looked up. And noticed the sunlight had shifted. It glinted off the broken glass in the roof above her. And there, for just a moment, she saw herself. But not truly. Her reflection, warped in the cracked pane. Hair pulled tight. Eyes hollow. A version of herself that might have emerged if she hadn't escaped the violet room. Beneath the reflection, a fingerprint. Pressed into dust. Not hers. And traced beside it, written on the inner glass in charcoal. Even now, you still look back. She stood. Slowly. Gathered the paper. Folded the incomplete profile into her coat. And as she turned to leave, a single note hit the air behind her. Patchouli. Wine. And red sugar. A scent she hadn't worn in 15 years. The night she first met a man who knew her name. Before she said it, she didn't look back. But she wrote, one last time. He doesn't just want me to profile him. He wants me to remember that I already did. And failed. Chapter 21, the penultimate scene, her silence replayed. The townhouse was still. Too still. No footprints on the marble. No scent of intrusion in the air. And yet, he had been here. Not in violence. Not in noise. But in precision. Cassandra stepped inside, and the scent greeted her first. Violets. Frankincense. Damp stone. A perfume worn only once in her life. Her mother's funeral. And never worn again. She moved through the darkened hall without turning on the lights. The shadows didn't startle her. But the way the air held her breath like a question did. As if the house itself was waiting for an answer. She entered her study. On the desk. Exact center, perfectly aligned. A small black box. No ribbon. No note. Just a voice recorder placed on top. Already playing. She didn't touch it. Only listened. There was no introduction. No music. Only ambient sound. A chair creaking. A door closing in the distance. And then. Her breath. Sharp. Held. Then released. Then held again. She knew this rhythm. It was the moment she returned home from her mother's burial. The moment she sat in the dark study and didn't speak for 3 hours. There had been no one there. Or so she thought. But now. That silence had been recorded. Tears didn't rise. Not yet. But her hands went still. Because what she heard next wasn't words. It was the absence of them. Every twitch. Every flicker. Every restrained sob she never allowed herself to release. He had captured it. Not as sound. As portrait. The scent deepened as the recorder continued. What began as violet became oak moss. Myrrh. Smoked paper. And something old, like dried ink sealed in grief. The exact smell of that day. You recreated it, she whispered. Down to the breath. Then, finally, after nearly 5 minutes of silence. His voice. Soft. Unhurried. Familiar. You never said goodbye. So I did it for you. And you never cried. So I taught the air to do it instead. You didn't bury her memory. You embalmed it in silence. I only pressed my ear to the grave. The recording clicked off. Not abruptly. With a fade. Like a closing curtain. Cassandra remained still. She didn't move to turn it off. Didn't step away. She reached, instead, for her scent journal. And in the cleanest script she'd used yet, wrote. Scene 21, silence as scent, unspoken grief equals encoded ritual. Not surveillance. Remembrance. Then beneath it, in smaller handwriting. He does not want me dead. He wants me haunted. She stood. The scent in the room had changed again. The violets were fading. The myrrh remained. But layered beneath it now. A scent she hadn't smelled in years. Burnt snow. Singed fabric. And red sugar. The scent of the night she chose not to save someone. And someone else chose not to leave her. She closed the journal. Stepped back from the desk. And whispered, finally. I'm ready. Chapter 22, the final scene, the White Cathedral. The location wasn't marked on any map. No coordinates. Just a single ivory card, left on Cassandra's pillow after the last scene. Scrawled in red ink. White Cathedral. Where silence burns and memory is crowned. She knew the place. An abandoned chapel just outside Holborn. Once a sanctum for perfume monks who believed scent was a divine language. Now shuttered. Forgotten. Until tonight. She arrived alone. No backup. No message to Reeve. Just her coat. Her gloves. And her final journal page, left blank on purpose. She pushed open the chapel's great oak doors. They didn't creak. They welcomed. Inside, the air was saturated. Not cloying. Not poisoned. Composed. The nave had been transformed into a sensory cathedral. Suspended from the high arches, dozens of glass orbs, each filled with a different fragrance blend. Lit from within. Soft glows of amber, violet, gold, smoke. They hung like stars. Each one labeled. Not by name. By emotion. She walked beneath them, heart still, feet steady. Restraint. Belonging. Jealousy at a distance. The moment she chose silence over safety. Each orb was hers. Not general. Not poetic. Specific. Private. She stopped at one labeled. The scent she wore when she wanted to be followed. Inside. Rose. Pepper. Cedar. A whisper of danger dressed as invitation. She had worn it only once. The orbs continued down the aisle like a procession of ghosts. Until she reached the altar. Where no scents hung. Only mirrors. 7 of them. Fractured. Tilted. Each reflected a different version of her. In one, she was kneeling, head bowed. In another, smiling faintly, like she had just caught someone lying. But the center mirror. It didn't reflect her at all. Until she stepped forward. And there he was. The killer. The composer. Standing inside the reflection. Dressed in a black coat. Gloved hands behind his back. His face, not masked. Not smirking. Just quiet. You came, he said. His voice was gentle. Not victorious. Not surprised. Just, inevitable. Cassandra didn't step back. You wrote me, she said. I read you, he corrected. Then rewrote me. Only the parts you abandoned. Silence. Then. Who are you? The part of you that refused to be forgotten. She closed her eyes. The scent in the room shifted. All the orbs began to breathe. A wave of fragrance passed over her. A life in scent. Every note. Every grief. Every echo. When she opened her eyes, he had stepped closer. Still inside the mirror. Still distant. But she felt him like heat. You never killed anyone, she said. Not in flesh, he replied. Only in scent. I buried who you were. So you could finally see who you've become. Why me? She asked. Because no one catalogs memory like you do. And no one ever stopped to ask what that does to a soul. A pause. Then he raised one hand, slowly. Inside the mirror, he pressed a fingertip to the glass. And for the first time, she saw her own reflection do the same. Not mimicking. Echoing. A second card was taped to the back of the mirror. She pulled it free. One word. Stay. The lights dimmed. The scent slowed. And then. He was gone. The mirror only showed herself again. But now. Every version of her. All 7 reflections had merged. Whole. Unsettling. True. She stood at the altar of her memory. Wrote in her journal. Final scene, the killer was not a man. He was the memory of who I could have been. The ghost of emotional taxonomy. He did not want to murder. He wanted to mourn. Then. I am not who I was. But I know her now. By scent. By shadow. By silence. As she left the white cathedral. Every orb shattered behind her. Not with violence. With release. And for the first time in years. Cassandra Vale felt her lungs fill with air. That belonged to no one else. Chapter 23, The Scent That Wouldn't Fade. It had been 13 days since the white cathedral fell silent. No new messages. No new bodies. No signs. Just, quiet. Cassandra Vale had returned to her townhouse. She had replaced the scorched wood in her scent room. She had repurchased her favorite chair. She had begun to catalog again. Only this time, not for evidence. For her. But the scent still lingered. Not in her rooms. Not on her clothes. In her mind. Violet. Burnt sugar. The echo of something that once felt like grief, now fading into curiosity. She told herself she was at peace. She had walked through his gallery. Survived his script. Faced his mirror. But something still twisted beneath her ribs when she passed a certain alley in Soho. When the scent of benzoin and rain hit just right. When a song she never remembered knowing echoed from a record shop on Maddox Street. It wasn't guilt. It was recognition. A small envelope arrived by courier. Plain. No note. No return address. Inside. A single cassette tape. Unmarked. She stared at it for a long time. Didn't play it. Didn't break it. Just placed it on her nightstand. And wrote in her scent journal. The scent has changed. The composition has softened. He's gone, but the air still waits for him. But that night. She dreamed. She walked through the white cathedral. But now it was underwater. The glass orbs floated, glowing faintly. Her reflection waited at the altar. But this time. She stepped into it. And became him. She woke with her hand on her throat. Eyes wide. Breath shallow. But not afraid. Just, aware. That something had shifted. She stood. Crossed the room. Pressed play on the cassette. It clicked. Spun. And then. Silence. 5 minutes. Then. A voice. We only end stories when we think we understand them. But you and I know better. We are still writing. Just with different ink. Different scent. Different shape. A pause. Then. This isn't a goodbye, Cassandra. It's an inhale. Hold it. And the tape stopped. She turned to the mirror across the room. Her reflection blinked. Moved slightly before she did. Only by a breath. But she noticed. She always noticed. She reached for her pen. And wrote. To be continued. Then added, almost softly. By either of us. Chapter 24, The Perfumer's Grave. It started with the wrong note in the air. Not bitter. Not sweet. Just, off. Like a perfume misapplied. Too much of something that should have whispered. Cassandra was walking through Clerkenwell on a rainy Tuesday, coat buttoned, gloves on, mind quiet for once. And then. Benzoin. Clove. Blood orange. She stopped walking. Because that combination had never existed before. Not in a commercial scent. Not in a boutique line. Not in her own blends. But it had existed. In her dream. She followed it. Not like a hound. Like a woman who had already survived the fire and stepped back into the smoke on purpose. It led her to a forgotten apothecary. Boarded up since the 1960s. Dust on the windows like morning lace. But the door? Slightly ajar. She entered. And it was cold. Not physically. Existentially. As if the room had never contained life. Only echoes of it. Shelves still stood. Bottles still rested in tilted rows. But one vial lay on the floor. Broken. Its contents seeping into the warped wood. And that scent. Benzoin. Clove. Blood orange. Still fresh. As if it had been dropped only minutes before. She knelt beside it. Let her gloved fingers hover over the amber stain. And there, scorched into the floorboards, so faint it looked accidental. A shape. A perfume bottle. Stylized. Angular. Empty. But inside it, a skull. Etched in one stroke. Below it, a word. Memory. Cassandra didn't move for a long time. When she stood, the floor creaked beneath her, once. Then twice. She looked around the apothecary and saw. No dust on the shelves behind her. Only the one she hadn't turned toward yet. Someone had been here. Very recently. On the counter, beneath a cracked glass case, she spotted a label she hadn't seen in over a decade. Perfumier, C. Marin. Her blood froze. Calix Marin. The name from the fabricated trial. The ghost who said, I didn't build it for her. I built it from her. She took out her scent journal. Flipped past the final entry. Past the mirror. And wrote again. In red ink. Case reopened, C. Marin is not a fabrication. He is the perfumer. The ghost. The architect of scent-built memory. And he has left something unfinished. She turned to leave. But something in the broken glass caught her eye. A glint of reflection. She stepped closer. It wasn't light. It was a photograph. Old. Sepia-toned. Her. Standing outside her childhood home. But in the foreground, blurred. A man's silhouette. Watching her. With a camera. The date scribbled on the back. March 17, 1999. She was 13. She didn't shiver. Didn't speak. She only folded the photo. Slipped it into her pocket. And whispered. You started long before I noticed. But I notice now. Chapter 25, The Memory Labyrinth. The map arrived on her doorstep sealed in wax, folded like origami, and impossible to read with the eyes. It smelled faintly of myrrh, violet leaf, and burnt sugar. At first, it appeared blank. But when Cassandra touched it with a blotter dipped in white sandalwood oil, the same she had used as a memory base years ago, the map bloomed into existence. Not ink. Not graphite. Scent. Each line was a blend. Each path, a composition of emotion and history. The labyrinth was real. And it was beneath the city. She knew where it began, a long sealed entrance at an abandoned underground station, Temple East, shuttered in 1942. She didn't hesitate. Not anymore. The air was warm with stone breath. Moist. Bitter. Smelling of time left too long in the dark. She moved slowly, lantern in one hand, scent journal in the other. The walls were etched with glass vials. Some shattered. Some intact. Each one labeled in the same red handwriting. Her laughter, 2003. When she lied to save him, Geneva. The perfume she never wore, but wanted to. She was walking through her own emotional autopsy. Each chamber of the labyrinth was shaped like a moment. A staircase with the scent of fear. A corridor that breathed like her mother's study. A door sealed in regret, opened only when she whispered, "I forgive you." To herself. She moved deeper. And at the center of the maze. No shrine. No fire. No trap. Just a room made of mirrors. But these weren't ordinary reflections. Each mirror showed a different version of her. One wearing a mask. One holding a vial labeled oblivion. One smiling in the arms of someone who no longer existed. One holding a scalpel. And at the center. A chair. Facing a blank wall. On it, a coat. His coat. Familiar. Worn. Still holding his scent, orris root, graphite, and something bitter beneath devotion. A note pinned to the collar. Cassandra. You were always both the hunter and the ghost. I was never your reflection. I was your echo. And echoes only exist because something spoke first. She stood before the mirrors. And at last, she understood. He was never trying to kill her. He had always been the version of her that grieved in secret. That never spoke. That watched the world through glass. And wrote its obituary in scent. She stepped forward. Picked up the coat. It fit. Not perfectly. But comfortably. Like an inheritance. She opened her scent journal. The last page. And wrote. The killer was not Calix Marin. He was memory. And memory, when left unspoken, becomes legend. He is not gone. He is rewritten. Then added. I have walked through who I was. Now I will walk into who I must become. She turned from the mirrors. Took one last breath of the air that smelled of every part of her life. And exhaled. As she left the labyrinth, the path behind her began to dissolve. One by one, the vials cracked. The scents faded. The doors sealed. Not in warning. But in completion. Outside, morning had broken. But the wind smelled different now. Not grief. Not guilt. Possibility. And in her coat pocket, where the final vial once rested. A note. Handwritten. Unmistakably her own pen. Your next case awaits, Cassandra. But this time. Don't follow the scent. Become it.
Every mystery leaves a mark. And the next case is already unfolding. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe, like, and share. There are more secrets waiting to be uncovered. Join us in the next chapter of A Study in Secrets.